Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of LCS Breakdown. So, today's topics, I want to do a little week 1 recap, I want to do some team takeaways and how they're looking so far. We'll go over my record on predictions, and then do week 2 predictions. This episode hopefully will be a bit of a shorter one, maybe around 20 minutes, but I was planning for around 20 minutes last time and I doubled it, so let's see what happens next. So starting off in order, the first game on Saturday. Surprisingly, 100 Thieves beat Team Liquid. Now, maybe for some it wasn't too surprising, maybe for some it's just pretty hype and really enjoyable, but this is the outcome. I am pretty sure that almost everyone expected this not to happen. So what happened in the game? Sniper played Riven, and for anyone who doesn't know, Sniper was a Riven one-trick when he was playing League of Legends as like a baby and getting high elo. So this is like his most played champion, the thing that he's most comfortable on, and he got to play it on the LCS stage. The thing is, the Riven got really nullified by the Udyr pick from Impact, and nothing spectacular really happened from the Riven. He made a couple decent flanks, but that could have happened on any other champion, and he even got caught out in the solo or in the side lane a couple times, and died needlessly because of it. But he wasn't a reason the team was ever losing the game. He managed to stay about even, if not slightly behind in lane versus the Udyr. And the rest of the 100 Thieves was really able to take advantage of the draft gap that they had taken. Despite Core JJ getting first blood on the Ashe support in the bot lane, the double enchanter bot lane just really went too hard. And once they figured out how to team fight together, it led to easy fights and easy wins. Now from the Team Liquid side of things looked pretty decent up until they fell apart in the late game, but that has typically been where Team Liquid's fallen apart in the past anyway. But it's worth noting that Jan actually had a pretty good lane phase. He had the first assist with Core JJ getting first blood. He had some pretty good 2v2 kills, and he went, I think it was even in lane as far as CS goes, which is usually desired when you're against a double poke bot lane. APA in the mid lane, however, did get to play his patented Ziggs, but he didn't look great on it. He made a few mistakes as far as positioning goes in lane. He got caught out in rotation a couple times trying to help out bot lane, and he just didn't look like he looked last split. It's probable that, the team is still working together to get their synergies, communications may be a little off, but at this point, there's no real excuses other than APA is still technically a rookie and needs a little bit of time in the oven. And then as far as Impact and Umti go, they both looked fine. Impact was solid on the Udyr in the top lane. He was able to fend off the Riven 1 trick from getting any leads, and Umti looked pretty serviceable on the Xin Zhao. No real complaints from me here. Now to gloss over the 100 Thieves side real quick again. We talked about Sniper, we mentioned the bot lane a little bit, but we didn't go over them too much. The double enchanter bot lane from 100 Thieves in Meech and Ayla ended up being pretty good. During their lane phase, they weren't the strongest, but they are scaling picks anyhow, so they're not supposed to win lane super hard. And then their impact in team fights was in late game very prominent. They did their jobs as they're supposed to do to carry everyone else on the team through the team fights, keep them healthy, keep them shielded, keep them moving fast. No real complaints about how the bot lane went here. Now, River it was very nice to see that he was looking like he was back to his former self, at least somewhat. He did not make any super noticeable mistakes. He picked his engages and his fights on the Vi really well. He got out who he needed to catch out, he ulted who he needed to ult, and he team fought pretty decently. And then it was actually surprising to see in the mid lane, Quid on the Yone actually performed pretty well. He was doing fine in lane against APA with the Ziggs. He managed his team fights really well. He had a couple ult engages that looked just fine. So it's actually a little refreshing to see Quid not looking like he's just a passenger on a team. Now this next game, Cloud9 versus 100 Thieves. I'm kind of go over this island actually pretty quickly because there's not a ton to talk about here. C9 won versus NRG, and it's pretty much as everyone was expecting. There's nothing like super crazy that happened. C9 is just looking like a really cohesive team, and if you listened to their voice comms video, they're communicating really well, and they're sounding like they're a really good fit for each other. On the energy side, there was nothing super even egregious that they did wrong. They just kind of got outmanned by all of the better players on the other side of the rift. There's nothing actually a ton to say about this. I think NRG, who is kind of a playoffs team as far as we know at this point, I think they'll end up being okay. The rest of the competition isn't a lot harder. The hardest game next might be FlyQuest later on, but these are really the only teams they have to worry about, and I am not super concerned about them up against any of the other teams in the league right now. Next up, we have FlyQuest versus Shopify Rebellion, and FlyQuest took the victory here. The outcome was expected, but the way that they got there was not quite as expected. Shopify actually put up a pretty decent fight, though you might have to attribute that to the FlyQuest 0 damage comp. They had a tank Udyr and a tank Poppy and an Orianna, a Senna, and a Seraphine. And it's like, it makes sense. You know, you have two healers in the bot lane, both of whom can put out some damage. You have one actual hard mage in the mid lane, and then you have Poppy, who can build damage, but just didn't in this game. And you have the Udyr in the top lane, who is just like the tank to be right now, who also should be splashing some AD in the build, which was actually very nice to see Bwipo doing. It was kind of hard to make it through the game, watching this FlyQuest 0 damage comp scale pretty much all the way through, because like, take for example the scaling comp that 100 Thieves built up in the first day. They at least had an interesting couple lanes. They had a jungler who could make a lot of plays, and River was making the most of that for sure. And then there was a interesting bot lane that kind of got into a bunch of scraps that maybe while they shouldn't do that, it at least just made it more entertaining. This game, however, from FlyQuest was just like, there's two tanks in top jungle. Kind of makes it hard to play the game through them. Mid lane is Orianna against a Zac, by the way, which Insanity is insane for. And then there was the bot lane, which is kind of scaling and waiting their turn, right? So it was nice to see Bwipo come back. He was back to all his shenanigans. He invaded the enemy jungler's red buff at level 1, prevented them from farming for the first 2 minutes of the game. Inspired looked pretty good. He stole first blood from Jensen. Jensen looked solid on his pick. And then the bot lane with Masu and Busio, they were pretty solid. No big complaints there. Shopify, however, was able to take advantage of some of the early pressure that they were able to put on, say, the bot lane with the Lucian Nami versus the Senna Seraphine. The mid lane matchup wasn't going like fantastic because Insanity did lose first blood over to the Poppy, But after he pretty much got his first item, he was almost unkillable and was kind of nailing every engage. Then the Xinjiao Aatrox in the jungle top, they were looking pretty decent. Again, the Udyr matchup is not looking great, and I suspect that Udyr is kind of just going to be a permaban for like the rest of the season, probably. But the Aatrox wasn't able to make a lot out of much. But the Xinjiao, despite being behind in farm at the start because of Bwipo going into his jungle and stopping him from farming, he was able to make it through the game, play the game a little harder, and Shopify didn't look terrible in their first game. If they clean a few things up, and maybe if they just have a slightly more conventional mid lane pick, or something that Insanity is just more confident on playing, then things will work out. I have faith in this team a little bit. Again, not super sure on where Bvoy is going to be starting, if it's going to be this week or if Turtle is going to play another week. But Turtle actually looked pretty decent on the Lucian, so if he's going to be playing again, I'm not going to complain. So, lastly, on Saturday, we have Dig versus Immortals. Now, it didn't go the way that I wanted it to. Dignitas did beat Immortals, but things are not all doom and gloom. So, first off, XU and Dove looked way better than I had expected. Dove played the Corki to great effect. XU was playing the Vi and making good decisions, making good engages. Rich up in the top lane, he did get counterpick, so that is... At least I think he got counterpicked. Not entirely sure anymore. But he did play a winning matchup, Gragas into the Jax. So, he also piloted the matchup very well. He solo killed the Jax really early on in top lane. He solidified the fact that the Jax would pretty much not be a part of the game for most of it. Castle was not able to impress me or probably anyone else on this day. Castle and Mask are looking like they're off on a little bit of a slow start. Now, we'll get to game 2 later, but Mask did perform better in game 2 than he did in game 1, which is a good sign, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Tactical had maybe one tactical moment, I think, where he ended up getting caught out and murderized into oblivion. But overall, INT didn't look dysfunctional. They just looked like they need to make improvements on some on individual players themselves and some on the whole teamwork. Dignitas, on the other hand, again, XU and Dev looked great. Rich was playing very well, and I think Tomo was a little bit muted, but he didn't do anything bad. He had he had at least one or two good team fights. So overall, I'm not super upset with how this game turned out, and it's actually nice to see Dignitas is putting up a little bit of a fight at the start of the season. But I do think Immortals is just off to a little bit of a slow start. That being said, I actually, since it timed up perfectly, I want to give a shout out to Isles for this play right here, where he saves Rich's life and turns the 3v1 dive into a 1-for-2 trade. And it was honestly just great to see. So I'm just going to let this play. So, moving on to week 2, I think the first game, which is Team Liquid versus Shopify Rebellion, I think this game is the most interesting of the 4 that we had on this day. The other 3 games are kind of just normal stomps that you would kind of expect to see any other week. But this first game here, Team Liquid did end up beating out over Shopify Rebellion. Now, again, this isn't like a terrible thing. Shopify was playing decently. They had some leads in the mid and bot side. It is unfortunate that Fake God was getting bullied like all game, getting constantly ganked and pushed into tower, and he was not having a fun time. But the team looked like they are at least somewhat cohesive. Again, if they just have some things that they look better on, some things that they improve a little bit with maybe communication, how they approach fights, then this team could still be top four. Top five minimum, but I believe in the top four, okay? Team Liquid, APA looked much better. He didn't play Ziggs, he played Azir, which I don't think we've seen him play on the LCS stage yet. And he looked decent. He looked better than he did on the Ziggs game. And Umti was playing pretty smart through the whole game. He was where he should have been pretty much at all times. He was very smart with his engages on the Poppy. He was able to use the ult to secure Rift Herald. He was pretty quietly playing pretty well that game. So, now, in my opinion, the rest of these games are pretty boring, so I'm not going to go super hard on them. I'm just going to read these off while we watch C9 clobber 100 Thieves. C9 did beat 100 Thieves. Nothing to note, really. Though C9 even did get a little sloppy at times, but, you know, it's kind of first place syndrome at its best. FlyQuest did beat Immortals. Again, Mask had a better game, but this is just the expected outcome every time. And NRG did beat Dignitas, and it was just business as usual for our NA boys, right? Nothing really to write home about because we're playing at home. So, what are my overall takeaways from week 1? So, Cloud9, they're looking pretty good. The team synergy is doing great. The team has been pissing in the same toilet together. But there's nothing really to write home about yet. Nothing super amazing has happened, and honestly, we haven't seen them play their best competition, which is probably going to be FlyQuest. On to FlyQuest, we might want to start thinking about how everyone called C9 a super team, but no one has been calling FlyQuest a super team. And there's reason for that. Whippo hadn't played for a year, Inspired hadn't played for 6 months, so there's some questions, and Jensen didn't even look good. But if we take the look at how C9 has their 3 MVPs, they have also Fudge, who is just their rock, and they have Vulcan, who has been the best support over the past 2 or 3 years. Okay, except last year. But FlyQuest has Whippo, FlyQuest has Inspired, FlyQuest has Jensen. Again, if we're ignoring Vulcan's last year, we have to ignore Jensen's last year, because Jensen has been looking pretty decent so far. So, if we're calling C9 a super team, maybe FlyQuest could be argued to be a super team as well. Something to think about. They're not as super as Cloud9, but they're probably pretty damn close. Next, we have Team Liquid. They're looking about as I had expected. They're starting off pretty decent, but they're kind of slow. The players are mostly off and on, mostly looking at the 2 young ones in APA and Yon. They're a little bit hot and cold, so we need to see them get consistent, and then they will improve from there. Shopify Brilliant is also looking a little slow, but they are showing a lot of promise. They are showing a lot of potential, and I don't think it's a far stretch to say that they could be top 4. NRG is looking like they're looking fine. Last season they had an issue where they would lose to all the really bad teams and win against the really good teams. So this year so far they've flipped it and they lost to the good team and won versus the bad team. So I'm not sure what that means yet, actually, but it probably means something. 100 Thieves has had a good start, but I'm willing to bet that that team will fall off sooner rather than later, because I doubt River can keep up with the high level performance and carrying this team. We need to see Sniper on more champions. We need to see the bot lane play more things that aren't double enchanter. And we need to see if Quid can keep up his higher level of play that he had than last year. And then lastly, I think we have Immortals, who I think just needs time to cook. Um, they're starting off slow. They're not looking. They probably do look like the worst team out of the week one so far, but it's not the end of the world. And I think that they can still finish in 6th place if they clean their act up, and maybe they need to play a little more around tactical. So at the end of week one, my record with predictions is 5 out of 8. 62.5% of the time I have been correct, which, interestingly enough, is actually the same amount of wins that Blue Side has. Blue Side is winning 5 out of 8 games so far this year, which is 62.5% of the time. This trend will probably continue because there are a lot of really powerful first picks, but theoretically red side should be the stronger in draft because of all the counter picks they get. Now, it was actually really nice to see 100 Thieves make use of this in the very first game of the season, but there wasn't a total ton of it afterwards, and then they didn't really do anything interesting for draft in game 2 anyway. So we'll have to see how this continues. I'm interested to see if people can come up with more creative red side drafts to oppose blue side winning all the time. But probably not. Yay. So let's move on to our match predictions for week 2. Pretty simple here. There's a lot of games that might kind of end up being boring, but I expect a couple of them to be pretty good. So we have Dignitas versus C9, with C9 taking the win. We have NRG versus 100 Thieves, where NRG should come out on top. TL versus Fly, with Fly winning. Immortals versus Shopify. This one could be interesting, or if Immortals continues how they've been looking, it should kind of just be a Shopify stomp. Day 2, Dignitas versus 100 Thieves. I have Dignitas right there, and that one, because it's two teams that are kind of towards the bottom, that one might be the most interesting match of the day. It's Cloud9 versus Shopify. Cloud9 should win easy. NRG versus Fly. I expect it to be less exciting, but more important than Dignitas versus 100 Thieves. I have FlyQuest winning. I think they're just the better team right now with the better players in the more important positions. But there's a chance that NRG upsets. And then Team Liquid versus Immortals, where I'm not actually fully confident in Team Liquid to win this game, but it's more likely than Immortals winning. Talking about side winnings, I think all of the red side victories happening this week, I think it's mostly just because the team is just that much better than their opponent. I don't actually think side selection is going to matter a ton this time. Okay, one last thing I actually decided to go over before I end the video is 14.2 patch notes a little bit. Because LCS is being played on live patch, whenever a new patch comes out, the LCS will immediately be playing it the next weekend. So I think maybe it's important to go over a couple of these things just to see how they might affect pro play. So firstly, we have the support quests are being changed, or the support items rather are being changed a bit. So anyone who buys the support item will contribute towards the CS penalty if people are CSing with it. So what that means is if two people share the support item, they're both going to be suffering a lot with reduced gold income. So they've pretty much killed double support. I think it might still be possible in very, very niche situations that we probably won't ever see. So double support is dead. This is probably good. I don't like seeing an AD carry with twice the amount of money that they should normally have. It's kind of lame in game. Next up, there were some Rumble changes. He did get nerfed a little bit, and then he got slightly kind of buffed a little bit on top of it. So I'm thinking that Rumble is kind of power neutral, and he should still be very important to see in the top lane. We did see some hexplate changes. This might be a slightly better item now. We're going to maybe see more priority for the Nocturne being picked or banned. AP items in general all took small nerfs, so I don't actually expect that to change anything. And what else do we have as I scroll through this one last time? Oh, Ezreal actually did get some meaningful buffs. So I'm very curious to see how that will change. I wonder if we're going to have any, like, Senna Ezreal or Ezreal Senna. Ezreal will make actually good use of a support item. So there might be a chance we see, like, a 80 carry playing Ezreal, but taking the support item, and the support playing something like Senna or Seraphine without the support item. It's a little crackpot theory, but it's possible. Lastly, there was one more thing a little bit. Oh, Gragas did get some meaningful buffs. Gragas top lane is going to be a bit better. Gragas jungle is going to be pretty much better. Hui got some changes. He got some buffs. Maybe we'll see the first LCS Hui this weekend. Hopefully. I want to see it. Karma did get some big changes. So actually, Ezreal Karma is also looking pretty good right now. Arthas buffs, Rumble changes, Shen tiny changes. Twisted Fate is interesting, but I don't think pro play is going to make use of like almost any of this. And I think that should be it for the patch notes changes that will affect our league. And that will do it for us. This has been LCS Breakdown. The patch notes decision, I think, pushed me like over 25 minutes now, but that's not terrible. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope the changes I've done have made it more enjoyable to actually view. And I'm going to keep working on trying to improve on this little by little, week by week. If you want to see episode 3 of LCS Breakdown, please leave a like and a subscribe. Ring the bell if you want the notification for when it drops, and I will see you guys next time.